Good afternoon, cool cats and kittens. Happy Thursday, January 11th. Again, if you did not check in with me yet this week, either by Zoom or email, again, today or tomorrow, but it's got to be done during the school week. We are continuing our conversation regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Tuesday, we talked about the religious connection between the Muslims, Christians, and Muslims, Christians, and Jews, all of whom find significant importance in and can call at one point in time or another Palestine home. Today, we're moving on in our coverage of why this area is so conflicted. Beyond the different religious groups that found their base there, their catalyst of existence there, we need to start talking about the political changes of this region. We look at the map here, we can see that Palestine, Jerusalem is more or less at the crossroads of the ancient world between Africa, Europe, and Asia. This region was constantly changing between multiple groups of people. You're going to have the Egyptians and eventually the Babylonians and the Syrians and the Akkadians, the Persians, the Romans, the Byzantine Empire will come through. Again, constant change, constant ebb and flow of people. But during this time, the Palestinians have always more or less had a presence there for a significant period of time. The Jews have, in some way, shape, or form, found this place to be home, as well as the Christians. So while the ruling class of this region has been under constant change for thousands of years, the inhabitants, in some number, may not be in significant numbers, but in some number have always remained there. There's been some presence of those three groups of people for a long period of time in recent centuries, right? So we're thinking the last 500, 600, 700 years. This area has largely been controlled by the Arab world. And after the 7th century, the Arab world is undoubtedly Muslim, right? Now, there are Palestinians who are Jews, and there are Palestinians who are Christians. There are Palestinians who are Muslims. But with that being said, the ruling class, the ruling power of the Holy Land for centuries was a Muslim nation. That Muslim nation was the Ottoman Empire. There are different versions. There are different clans of Ottomans, right? We're talking specifically about the Ottoman Turks who originated in present-day Turkey, ancient Anatolia, all right? But for centuries, there have been different versions of Turks who have come through and controlled this region. Most recently, and for the longest period of time, we got to talk about the Ottomans. The Ottomans were more or less have a stronghold over this region for several hundred years until World War I. In World War I, the Ottoman Empire is allied with the Central Powers, right? Austria, Hungary, right? That is who they are going to work with. We know from our world history class, the Central Powers lose, right? The Allies, the Allied powers win. The British, the French, I guess you could say the Russians. Definitely the United States. This is really where this major problem finds its foundation. All right, today's problem finds its foundation going back to 1916, 1917. You win a war, you get the spoils, right? The age-old saying, to the victor goes the spoils. Our present-day conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis largely begins with the end of World War I and the British and the French deciding that they're more or less going to go halvesies. They're going to go halvesies in this region. The British are going to take some land. The French are going to take some land. Try to avoid any sort of religious conflict because they know what they're getting into. They don't want to deal with this conflict. They don't want a religious war between the Christian West and the Muslim Arab world. They decide that they're going to declare Palestine, the Holy Land, to be a more or less independent region. There'll be some influence from European countries, but no one's going to take this one for their own. From the Sykes-Picot Agreement a couple of years prior, then we fast forward to the Balfour Declaration, which comes out right around 1917. Balfour Declaration, again, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the Balfour Declaration, these names come from the people who actually made the agreement or made the declaration. These are governmental ambassadors, governmental officials, representatives. You get what I'm saying. But near the end of the war, all right, after the British, the French more or less decided to go halvesies in this region, the British realized that the Jewish people need their own homeland. And this is going to be an ongoing problem that will continue, starts in the 1800s and goes through most of the 20th century, or at least the first half of the 20th century. This prejudice and stereotype that people have towards non-Jews have towards the Jewish people. By the way, if you hear the term Gentile, a Gentile is a non-Jew. The Gentiles have an issue with the Jews, and this goes back quite some time. To this day, Gentiles, some Gentiles, are going to blame Jews for the crucifixion of Jesus. Right? Depending on what type of church you go to, oftentimes on Easter Sunday, right next to the communion statement in the church, you might call it a program or a flyer. But on the service handout, there's oftentimes a little asterisk that says, you know, in the 21st century, we're no longer blaming the Jewish people today for what happened 2,000 years ago. But there are still people, especially during this time when the world was less non-secular and religion played a greater importance in life. People still blame the Jews for the crucifixion of Jesus. Not to mention, we have to mention a stereotype that developed pertaining to the Jews regarding their wealth. For quite some time, the Jewish people were associated with banking, and that's not really necessarily anything of their doing. There was a point in time when the Catholic Church tried to clean up corruption and tried to address greed amongst their own congregations, and it was declared that it would be unchristian for Christians to charge people interest when they borrow money. And what that left many Christian bankers with is a significant problem. How can I run a bank? How can I run a bank if I can't charge interest? I mean, the purpose of having a job, the purpose of having a business is to make money. Bankers found themselves in a problem. How can I stay in business if I loan money and I can't get any money back? How am I going to generate income? All it leads me to do is spend the money that's here, and eventually I'm going to run out. So what was decided and what was figured out was kind of a loophole. Banks run by Christians would hire Jews. The Pope's declaration, the Catholic Pope's declaration that charging interest is unchristian, has no bearing on the Jewish population because they're not Christian. They're Jewish. Christianity came after them. Christianity descended from Jews. The Jews have zero care of what the Pope says. So more or less, the inability to charge interest declared by the Catholic Church will result in many Jewish people being hired to run banks, and this will get them into the banking system. And again, because everybody needs money, and when you borrow money, you have to pay interest, this will allow them to, for a time, significantly profit. But it leads to another stereotype. Right? Through World War II, the United States government was trying to buy land from South American countries. They were trying to buy land in the Southern American continent so the Jewish people could have their own colony there. Why? Largely because of these stereotypes. No country wanted them in their country. As prejudicial and as awful as that sounds, no nation wanted to have the Jews there. Why? Because those are the people that killed Jesus, and those are the people that have exploited everybody else at their interest charges, even though they were the ones hired to do it. The Balfour Declaration makes for the first time, a Western country declaring that the Jewish people need to be sent back to their biblical, traditional homeland. They're going to argue it's because they're persecuted, they're prosecuted, they're oppressed. They need to find their own safe haven. In actuality, it's because no one wants them. But this brings us to the partition of Palestine. You can see the Holy Land, and you can see how this region was going to be divvied up. Anything in yellow was going to be the land that was kept for the Arab Palestinians that were in the region already. And they lived throughout this region. But basically what they were going to do is cut Palestine in half, give half of it to the Palestinians. So if you're a Palestinian living in the orange, you would have to move. And then give the other half to the Jews who would undoubtedly be coming back into that region. They either would have returned already with this Zionist movement, right? The return to the homeland, the Jewish return to the homeland, or they would have immigrated there after it was realized that this region was going to be cut in half between the Palestinians, the Arabs, and the Israelis. The reason why I tell you this is because once it's declared that the Jews are entitled to return to their homeland, this is where the conflict really is going to pick up. Because what has happened since 1947 and eventually 1948, 1947, the UN declares that Palestine is going to be divided. It's more or less half and half, ballpark. That's not a hard and fast rule, 50-50, but it's going to be divided up. The Jews started returning. And what you've seen happen here is on the slide on the right here, the picture on the right, you've seen what has happened to the Palestinian land. You've got before partition here, this is largely inhabited by the Arabs. You see the partition, right? More or less half, and then you slowly see a reduction of the green from one map to the next. The Palestinians have continuously lost land since the partition. How has that happened? How has that happened? Well, as the video more or less kind of told you, after 1947 and the United Nations declares that Palestine is going to be partitioned between the Arabs and the Jews, the country of Israel all of a sudden declares their independence, that they're a country, that they're fully sovereign. And this causes a conflict. The Arab countries surrounding them, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, they all attack. They're upset that their Arab brothers and sisters have lost their land, and two, the people that have taken their land have now declared that they're a country. So they attacked, and it's really as a result of the attacks that the Israeli people have been able to expand. The Israeli country may have been attacked by 5 different Arab nations, but they don't have the equipment, they don't have the training, they don't have the wherewithal or organization to defeat the Israelis. Israel was able to withstand the invasion from those 5 countries. And while Egypt may have been able to seize control of the Gaza Strip, and Jordan may have been able to seize control of the West Bank, Israel, one, didn't give up any of its land. It didn't lose any of its land that was set aside for them in the original partition. And because the Jordanians and the Egyptians were worried about the nearest areas to them, the Israeli government was more or less able to seize. I got to come back to this one here. The Israelis were more or less able to seize control of all the rest of the land set aside for the Palestinians. Right? This is the War of Independence. Some will refer to it as the 1948 war. There will be a series of wars that occur between 1948 all the way through today, where the Israeli people are going to be attacked by, or the Israeli people will attack themselves, surrounding Arab nations. In each one of those conflicts, the Israelis, with a large, organized, standing military, is going to be able to continue to acquire more and more and more land, very similar to what we see in this century. Less than 27% of the original Palestinian land that was supposed to be kept for the Palestinians. They continue to take what is remaining. This is how they do it. They take it by force. Sometimes they are provoked and sometimes they are not. Friday, I'll talk about the 6-Day War, which, shocker, lasts 6 days. And I'll talk about the Yom Kippur War. And we'll talk not just specifically about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but how the 6-Day War and the Yom Kippur War starts to affect the rest of the world, because what happens in this region does have a significant impact on the rest of us, very specifically the United States. So I'm done with information today. You're gonna watch the next 25 minutes of the video, so you're gonna go up to 50. And I see I got a little typo here. Tomorrow, you're gonna watch up to an hour and 15, but I'll get that fixed. So go ahead, watch the next 25 minutes of the video, stop at minute 50. Again, I'll provide some more information tomorrow. And then we'll just keep on keeping on. Hope you're all doing well. Don't forget to check in, and if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email or come into that Zoom. We'll talk to you tomorrow.